When people talk about housing, they usually talk about dreams. I prefer to start with arithmetic. A dream will let you sign papers you should never sign. Arithmetic will usually save your life. So let us begin with the number that keeps showing up on screens all across America. Now, $500,000. Not for a mansion, not for a waterfront view, not for a place that makes your heart stop, for something ordinary. A box with bedrooms, a kitchen that already wants updating, a yard small enough to mow in one song, and a real estate agent bold enough to call it a starter home. And the first thing I want you to understand is that the crisis here is not just price, it is confusion. People keep mixing up three entirely different questions. Can the bank approve you? Can you make the payment next month? Can you actually afford the house without turning the next decade of your life into a slow financial panic? Those are not the same question. The bank only needs you to survive the loan long enough for the machine to keep running. You need the house to fit inside a real life. You need room for repairs. You need room for savings. You need room for retirement. You need room for one bad year, one lost job, one broken furnace, one emergency room visit, one moment of reality. That is what affordability means. Affordability does not mean the lender smiled, the app said approved, and the broker told you the number works. Affordability means you can own the house and still own your peace. Most people have stopped using that definition. That is why so many people are walking into houses they technically bought and emotionally cannot carry. I have watched this happen over and over again. A family scrolls through listings late at night. Every place that is not falling apart cost $500,000. They feel behind, embarrassed, angry. They wonder whether they missed the train, missed the raise, missed the life script. They start doing mental gymnastics just to remain in the game. That is the first trap. Once you become emotionally committed to the idea that $500,000 is normal, you stop asking whether the number makes sense and start asking how to force yourself into it. That is where the danger begins. The median household income in America sits nowhere near the level that makes a $500,000 house comfortable under sane rules, yet the culture keeps insisting this is ordinary. The market calls it normal. Lenders frame it as achievable. Agents frame it as a smart move before prices go even higher. Nobody in the transaction is rewarded for telling you the truth. The bank is not paid when you decide to keep renting and invest the difference. The agent is not paid when you say the math is ugly. The seller is not paid when you walk away. The system pays everybody when you stretch. So naturally, the system is always trying to rename stretching as adulthood. That is why I want to drag the whole thing back into daylight. Start with the down payment. People talk about it as if it is some mere pre-game ritual, one annoying hurdle before the real event begins. It is much more important than that. On a $500,000 house, a classic 20% down payment is $100,000 in cash. That is not a rounding error. That is not couch cushion money. That is a number large enough to expose whether the dream is built on savings, family wealth, luck, or fiction. And for most households, it is fiction. So what do people do? They do what the market has trained them to do. They move down the ladder, 10% down, 5% down, minimal down, anything to get through the gate. And the moment they do that, they unlock a set of costs people love to ignore until those costs are already eating the budget. Private mortgage insurance, bigger loan balance, higher monthly payment, less equity cushion, more sensitivity to rates, more vulnerability if life turns on them. The strange thing about modern housing is that nearly every workaround for a giant price creates a second problem that arrives one or two steps later. You escape the down payment burden by putting down less. Now you carry PMI. You accept the large payment because the broker says you qualify. Now half your monthly flexibility is gone. You buy because you fear prices will keep rising. Now you are trapped in an asset you cannot comfortably maintain. It is one workaround after another, each one making the structure look possible at the exact moment it becomes more fragile. That is why I tell people never to stop the analysis at principal and interest. Mortgage math is the decoy. Homeownership math is the real thing. A $500,000 house is not a $500,000 decision. It is a chain of obligations. It is principal and interest. It is property tax. It is homeowner's insurance. It is maintenance. It is utilities that rise because the square footage rose. It is furniture, blinds, landscaping, tools, repairs, small ugly things the listing photos never mention. It is 1,000 cuts, all waiting politely until after closing. When people say they can make the mortgage work, what they often mean is they can make the mortgage work in a world where nothing else goes wrong. That is not a plan. That is a prayer. I have always believed that one of the fastest ways to destroy a household is to remove its margin. Margin is what lets a family absorb reality without losing dignity. Margin is what lets you fix the car and still pay the bill. Margin is what lets you leave a bad boss. Margin is what lets you invest through a downturn instead of selling into it. Margin is what lets your marriage survive stress that otherwise turns every dinner into a budget meeting. A house that eats the margin is not a wealth building machine. It is a stress amplifier with drywall. And that is exactly what happens when people buy homes at the top edge of qualification rather than inside the boundaries of comfort. Let us do this the way I like to do it. Not with slogans, with an ordinary family. Imagine two solid earners, together bringing in $160,000 a year. By the standards of the country, these are not struggling people. These are the people other people imagine are doing fine. On paper, they are exactly the kind of household modern housing tells itself should be able to handle a $500 home. Then taxes happen, retirement contributions happen, health deductions happen, reality happens. Suddenly the monthly take home number looks far less glamorous. Now the house arrives, the mortgage bill, the tax bill, the insurance bill, the maintenance reserve they do not want to budget because it makes the numbers stop working. The PMI, if they stretch the down payment, now add commuting, groceries, student loans, childcare, utilities, 2 cars, because suburbia is not built for one, and the normal cost of being alive in a country that charges you for breathing near a hospital. What is left is not abundance. What is left is a household with nice square footage and no room to make mistakes. That is what I mean when I say there is a massive difference between qualifying for a mortgage and being able to sleep at night after signing it. The housing industry has become very good at getting people to confuse those two conditions. You can live in a house and still be poor. In fact, some of the poorest feeling households in America are not the ones without houses. They are the ones with houses that consume every spare decision. Every repair becomes a negotiation. Every holiday becomes a budget event. Every pay raise gets swallowed before it is even felt. Every job becomes harder to leave because the mortgage is now the senior partner in the family. That is what people mean, often too casually, when they say house poor. I think the phrase is too soft. House poor sounds temporary, mild, almost fashionable. What it often really means is that you have taken the single largest fixed cost in your life and pushed it so close to your income ceiling that ordinary randomness now has the power to wreck you. Air conditioner fails, water heater dies, property taxes rise. Insurance reprices because the climate has changed again and the insurer has learned a new word for your zip code. Roof issue, plumbing issue, medical bill, hours cut, one child needs braces, one parent needs help, one car requires new tires. A truly affordable house absorbs these things. A stretched house converts them into crisis, and once people are inside that crisis structure, something even more destructive begins to happen. They start calling misery normal. That is how bad systems perpetuate themselves. If enough people are drowning, drowning starts to look like adulthood. You hear it in the language, everybody is stretched. That is just homeownership. That is the price of the dream. You have to be willing to sacrifice. I have no problem with sacrifice when sacrifice is purchasing something valuable. I do have a problem when sacrifice is being used to disguise a broken equation. There is no virtue in buying a house that prevents you from building anything else. There is no prize for pouring your future into property tax, insurance, interest, and repairs while telling yourself you are winning because you own. Ownership without margin is not freedom. It is a liability with landscaping. One of the most poisonous ideas in American money culture is that renting is automatically throwing money away, while buying is automatically building wealth. That sentence has ruined a lot of households. Renting can be expensive. Of course it can. It can be frustrating. It can be limiting. It can feel temporary when you want permanence. But renting a place you can comfortably afford while investing the difference is not failure. Buying a place you cannot comfortably afford while telling yourself the pressure means you are building wealth is not wisdom. It is possible to own the wrong asset at the wrong price with the wrong cash flow and call it success, only because society likes the optics. I would much rather see a family with strong savings, steady investments, modest rent, and emotional room to think clearly than a family with a deed, a giant payment, and no ability to survive bad luck. That is the quiet point most people miss. A house is not wealth if it prevents wealth from being built elsewhere. A house is not safety if it makes the entire rest of the balance sheet fragile. A house is not the American dream if every month inside it feels like an audition for collapse. The world keeps encouraging people to stretch because stretching produces transactions, and transactions are where fees live. Every person in the chain makes money on the home purchase. The mortgage lender, the title company, the appraiser, the agent, the insurer, the county, the contractor waiting later. Everybody gets paid when the buyer says yes. Very few people are paid to tell the buyer that no would have been the wiser answer. That is why you must become the adult in the room yourself. You must ask a question the system hates. Not what can I get approved for? Not how much house should I buy? Because prices always go up. Not what payment can I maybe survive if nothing breaks, and my income behaves, and the market smiles. The right question is this: what house can I own while still having room to be a sane human being? That question instantly reduces the fantasy set. It usually brings the target price down, sometimes dramatically. And if that lower number means the neighborhood changes, the yard shrinks, the commute gets longer, or the purchase gets postponed, then so be it. The purpose of shelter is to improve your life, not dominate it. I have noticed something over many years in business and investing. The people who build durable wealth are not usually the people who max out what is available to them. They are the people who leave room. Room in their budgets, room in their schedules, room in their reputations, room in their partnerships, room in their decisions. That room is what lets them act well when conditions change. Housing should be handled the same way. If you must buy, buy with room. Room for repairs, room for rate shocks if you are not fixed, room for children to become more expensive, room for taxes and insurance to rise, room for your own career to turn out differently than planned, room to live, not merely pay. If the house consumes the room, then the house is too expensive, regardless of what the industry tells you, and if the only way to justify the purchase is to assume every optimistic thing happens at once, that is not prudence, that is speculation. I want to say something directly to the person staring at listings and feeling like they are falling behind, because $500,000 now buys what used to feel ordinary. You are not crazy. The math really is brutal, and no amount of motivational talk changes the ratios. If you look at that house and the numbers do not work, the mature response is not to force yourself in. The mature response is to protect your future from a bad deal wrapped in social approval. That may mean renting longer. That may mean choosing a cheaper market. That may mean buying a smaller place. That may mean waiting until your income is stronger or your down payment is real. That may mean saying, very calmly, this market is asking me to destroy my margin, and I refuse. There is no shame in that. In fact, I think there is more dignity in refusing collective financial insanity than in joining it just to keep up appearances. A person who says no to an unaffordable house has not failed adulthood. He has passed arithmetic. That matters because once you stop trying to win the housing game by matching the market's fantasy version of normal, you can start building actual strength. You can grow your emergency reserve, you can invest consistently, you can avoid the kind of chronic financial stress that poisons marriages and makes every job feel like prison. You can preserve the ability to move, to switch careers, to survive an interruption, to think clearly. Those things are wealth too. In many cases, they are the most important forms of wealth. A $500,000 house is not affordable because it flatters your identity. It is affordable only if it leaves enough of your life intact after the payment clears. That is the standard. And if you hold that standard honestly, most people will find that the so-called starter home is not a starting point at all. It is a debt structure designed for incomes the average household does not have. The market may keep pretending otherwise. The banks may keep approving. The agents may keep smiling. The culture may keep whispering that you should stretch. But you do not have to participate in every delusion that has financing attached to it. Sometimes the smartest move is not buying the house. Sometimes the smartest move is keeping your freedom. I would rather see you financially strong in a smaller place than financially strangled in a larger one. Because the person with margin still has options, and the person with options is the one most likely to become wealthy in the end.